Okay, we are live. So hello everyone, welcome to another live coaching call, Marketing. We have our founder here back again, wanting to update us on what he's doing. And we've got some good topics to talk about, prepared and ready. We also have a good list of attendees. So those of you that are here live, there's a chat section there. You can just chat in any questions as they come up. Or if you have specific questions you've already got, you can put them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go through. But Matt, hello, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be back as always.
Yeah. And you're in Sacramento, right? That's where you're at right now?
I'm in Sacramento today.
Cool. So tell us, what have you been up to lately?
So we started the new school year, as I'm sure everybody has. And you go through those first couple weeks. Everybody gets situated, everybody gets settled. It was nice to see all the elementary children return. And now we're kind of looking forward to what our fall schedule is in terms of parent education. We're already thinking about our elementary move-up night, which is going to happen sometime later in the fall. So we're just kind of trying to get all that organized. We have our Journey and Discovery coming up in October, which is our signature parent event. If you've never done the Journey and Discovery, I would highly suggest that you consider it. It's, in my opinion, the best parent education tool and retention tool that you can use, because it really is an immersive, transformative experience for parents.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, can you talk a little bit more about that? I know that some of our members are familiar with it, but give us some background about how you're doing it, why you made that decision, and how successful it's been for you.
Sure. So the Journey Discovery, it's a lot of work. I'll tell you that much. It's kind of like the big open house that you're gonna have for your school, with those parents that you really want to make sure that they are understanding the philosophy, committed for the long term. And I use the word transformative, just like training is transformative for guides. I really do believe that the Journey of Discovery is transformative for parents, because it's the only event that they can actually live a day in the life of a child in the continuum of Montessori education. That's very rare. So rather than having a parent education where we're speaking at people for an hour in the evening and they're already tired and their children are with a babysitter at home or wherever, you have space and time to be able to explore really the nuances of Montessori and all those experiences that children have, in a way that is fun for them, in a way that is really, really meaningful. So as I mentioned, it's a lot of work to set up. You have work to do with your staff, but I highly believe that it's worth it. And if you could do it once a year, that would be fantastic. So it's been about 7 or 8 years now. We contacted Barbara Gordon, who actually created this event, the Silent Journey and Discovery. Barbara Gordon founded the Barbara Gordon Montessori School in Texas. We reached out to her and we brought her out for the first couple of journeys that we did. We really wanted to learn about how to do this correctly. This is a 2-day event. This is something that is held on usually a Friday evening and a Saturday morning. And that's actually the number one thing that I see people wanting to compromise on. They want to make it easier for people to attend. So, hey, we're just going to do the Journey and Discovery in a 3-hour session in the evening. That is a mistake. It's a 2-part program. And actually the time commitment is a really, really important factor. Friday night, people come to your school, and this is the journey part of the event. And this is a silent journey. So basically there's a meeting that happens at the beginning with whoever is leading the event. And you talk a little bit about Montessori philosophy for about 15 minutes maybe. And then actually what you're doing is they're walking through the classrooms. We started infancy and we go all the way up through upper elementary, but depending on the size of your school, you'd start at the youngest program and go through the oldest program. And Friday night is a silent journey. They're walking through the classroom, they're observing, they're looking at the environment. They're starting in the infancy, in the assistance infancy classroom, where you have these tiny, tiny, tiny chairs, and you have these didactic materials on the shelves. And what you're trying to get them to do is to get an impression, right? You want them to just observe and feel what the environment is like. There's no speaking during this time. It takes about, depending on how many programs you have, it takes us about an hour to get through the classrooms, and they have notepads that they take their impressions on. And you're basically guiding through the silent journey of all the environments. We want them to get an impression of it. So they take their notes and we work up from classroom to classroom. And then we come back as a group and we kind of process a little bit with the event leader. And you have these aha moments where people come and they really start to recognize, gosh, this is a prepared environment. So much thought and time and energy has gone into creating this environment for children. This is not just these tacky preschool classrooms that have, red, blue, and yellow and posters on the wall. I mean, this is a very thoughtful environment. And then you can start to relate that back to Dr. Montessori's philosophy. I mean, you decompress that. So really the event on Friday takes about, I don't know, maybe 90 minutes at the most. Really, really, really essential though, that it's done in 2 parts. Because if you were to go into the discovery part, which is the next day, on that same evening, they wouldn't have enough time to really process and have it really sink in and internalize. We want them to go home. We want them to drive home, talk about it with their spouse on the way home, and really talk about those details that you're going to see in a Montessori at all different levels, and let it sink in. They sleep on it, right? They come back the next morning, and now this is the time when they're actually going to live a day in the life at each level in the classroom, and get lessons from the guides, and explore the materials on their own, and really start to understand how Montessori is a continuum. I mean, it's a continuum of education that starts at birth and goes, I mean, ideally all the way up to 18 years old. So that what happens on Saturday is that you spend a half an hour, 45 minutes in each classroom, and the guides give lessons to the parents. They explore the materials. There's cards out where they can try to do things on their own. They can really start to see how there's a progression, and how there's indirect preparation at each level for the next level, and how we're starting to move from these concrete materials to abstract concepts when we get up to upper elementary. At the end of this experience, when they've gone through all the classrooms, they feel more bonded to the school. They come back into this group, and then we decompress what we've all experienced. And you have this feedback from parents about, I never knew what went into Montessori education before. I've actually been able to experience this rather than read it, rather than be told about, hey, trust us, this is amazing. I really get to see what a genius Dr. Montessori is, and how when Montessori is implemented authentically, it really does offer the best preparation for life that is out there really in the educational markets. So I've written extensively on this topic. I have a couple different blog posts, some photo essays that I've done, and I have a lot of resources that Barbara Gordon wrote, and also that we've written as our school to help other schools implement it. This is the best thing you can do in terms of a parent education event for retention, especially if you have an elementary program.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to be able to experience that a couple of times. And as a guide, it helped me deepen my practice, because you're working directly with the parents and they're asking those very clear, pointed questions. And it just helps you craft your ability to answer those questions so clearly, and then gather information for what parents really do want to know. Because so often our parents out there, kind of making their assumptions and their ideas without communicating to us, and we can make our assumptions and ideas of what they need. And that process for me as a guide was so important, because you meet in the middle, and then it just becomes very human again. Because I think sometimes what we end up doing is talking so much about how we deliver Montessori, right? Like how do we do Montessori? And we end up in those conversations with parents, but really you have to experience it to understand the layers and the complexity and the details that go with it. So this is an amazing event. If you're not doing it, definitely look into it. Matt, I'd love it if you would be able to share some of the resources you're willing to about Journey and Discovery, if you're up for it.
Yeah, the best thing to do is I did a photo essay about this on mariamontessori.com. It's 5 6 years ago. If you go to mariamontessori.com and just search Silent Journey Discovery or search my name, you'll see that post come up. And then quite honestly, if you just search Barbara Gordon Silent Journey Discovery, I know NAMTA has written on this topic before. It's really, really important that you do this the way that Barbara designed it. She tested this in many different variations. And again, I go back to this thing where I see a lot of schools trying to compromise it. Hey, let's just make this an evening event. Does not work in the same way. Will not have the same impact on your parents that it will when you spread it out and make it more, give it more time and space, give it time to breathe, give it time to set in. Montessori is not something that can be digested very, very quickly, and that's why this format is so essential. We had a question that came in from Heidi about how do you get parents to sign up? That's a great question. We've considered a couple different options before. We've kind of flirted with the idea of making it mandatory for some of our parents. I'm not a huge fan of mandatory events because I think that people aren't as receptive when they feel like they have to come to something. But I think that, listen, we make it very clear, ours sells out every year. We make it very clear that it's limited to a certain number of participants. And you can start to actually see who your really, really engaged parents are. And if you have more people that want to come than is available for the slots, you just hold a second one later in the year. I do recommend that you charge for this as well. We charge $25 per person and $35 per couple. It's not about, this isn't making money, and this isn't really the purpose of it, but you have to have a little bit of skin in the game, right? This can't be something where it's, oh, I'm gonna show up or not. Like, these are actually very, very precious spots. And I found that if you charge a nominal amount, that you'll have people more likely to show up, even, for $25, they will do that. And we're providing full meals and all that stuff. So that kind of helps to set off those costs. But I think that if you really, the best way to get people to sign up is to hold one event and then to get people to start talking about it, because they will love the event for sure. And then you can have testimonials and you can have people talking about how important it was for them to do it. But you have to get the ball rolling. And even if you have 10 people that come for the first time, you will then start to see more and more people attend your following events.
Yeah, I kind of think of this as like a Montessori retreat. Like you have to set aside time, parents, on your calendar to really dedicate to it. And having that structure where, again, $25 is not that much, but it's enough to say, okay, I'm committed, and that if you're not committed, I've got another person who is. So creating that scarcity, that's genius.
Okay.
Now, can we talk a little bit, move into retention? That has been a hot topic recently, and I think always it will be. So I'm curious to know from you, and if you experience this, where there's a drop-off at a particular age. Typically it's kindergarten because that's school age, and it's, public versus private. And if you do experience that, what have you done? What has worked? What hasn't worked? We'd love to hear from you on that part.
Well, I will say that I visited a lot of Montessori schools across the country, and every single Montessori school deals with this. So if you think that you are this unique flower where all these other schools have just 100% retention all the way through, I've got great news for you. You're not alone. And I've also got some kind of bad news for you in the sense that I think it's always going to be a struggle. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I think, it's out there in the zeitgeist that Montessori is a preschool. And I think most people who, when they think of Montessori, they immediately think preschool. They don't think elementary. So you're already kind of at a disadvantage in the sense that most people not most people, but a lot of people that will be interested in Montessori will be coming to you at the early childhood level and just thinking that's what it is. So you have to overcome that. That's the number one thing. The number two thing is that you're going to be competing against two other powerful factors. If you have people that are going to a public or charter program, you're competing against free, which is very, very, very difficult. And then if you are in a market where you have a lot of private schools, you're going to be competing against those private schools that are really easy to understand. And also, it's a much easier sell, right? You're getting a conventional education in a nicer environment with a more tight-knit community with tighter rules. You don't have to worry about social influences in the same way that you may have to in a public school. So we're already at a disadvantage in that. So that's just the way it is. You're not going to get around that, and we have to accept it. But there are some things that you can do to make sure that you have the lowest level of attrition that you can. Number one is you should start measuring that. You should start with data. You really need to know what your attrition levels are and where you're dropping off. In California, they implemented something called traditional kindergarten, and children can start in a TK public program at 4.9. That's a problem, right? We can't do a Montessori primary program without our 5 and 6 year olds. It is a 3-year program, and I always use this axiom, and I don't want to sound like a used car salesman, but I use this axiom with my admissions director that the buyers are liars, right? When people are coming in to enroll in your school, they're going to tell you everything that you want to hear. Oh, of course I'm committed for 3 years. Of course I understand the Montessori philosophy, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll get a Dear John letter when the child is turning 5 that, oh, this was the toughest decision that we ever had to make. But, we have to look at the long term, and we have to think about what's best for our child. So just know that people, it's not what they're saying, it's what they're doing. And so I'm a much larger fan of putting some barriers up to admission for certain levels. It's harder for us because, we started infancy, and probably the place where we have the most people starting, we have a lot of toddler environments. It's really hard for people to make a decision about elementary when their child is 14 months old. It's a bridge too far, in my opinion. But for primary especially, if you just start at primary, I really believe that you can do a couple things. You can put some barriers to entry, whether that is a Montessori 101 class, whether that is a multi-step tour and observation, where you're just putting a little bit more so that somebody that's looking for just a nice childcare program, or they're there because, their friend is there and they said it's great, that, they may not be willing to spend 2 or 3 extra days to get into your school if they're looking for something that's shorter term. So whatever that means for you, I'm not trying to make this something that is, impossible to do, unless you have so many people applying for your program. And by that point, you should be, hosting webinars on here to tell us how you're doing that. But my point is that you have to figure out what works for your community, even if it's just one thing, right? Don't think about this as like you're getting overwhelmed with 15 things to do to get into your school, but hey, maybe you require an observation in addition to a tour. So they have to come back and do an observation, and you can talk a little bit more after that observation about what they're seeing and what they're interested in. And it's really that conversation where you're starting to reiterate multiple times, this is a 3-year program. It's really important that you stay for the 3rd year. I always tell parents, you're wasting your money if you leave after 2 years. This is not going to be a good use of your funds, and I would recommend that you go to ABC preschool down the street, because that's going to prepare them for a kindergarten program. Montessori is not a preparation for kindergarten. It's a preparation for life. And yes, children will most likely do fine if they exit our program after 2 years, but they're not getting that payoff year when everything, this explosion in terms of reading and writing, this social maturity, this experience about being the oldest child in the classroom is such an essential experience. And that's what you need to be selling. You always need to be thinking about the final year and the payoff year, and really setting an expectation that if you're not going to stay for that, you're not going to get what I'm talking about. You're not going to get these benefits for your child at the end of it unless you stay for that 3rd year. It's much harder to do if you don't have an elementary program, for sure. And we started I opened a new school location that's just primary. It's early childhood, and we ended primary. And I was starting to experience a little bit about that, because we were in this area where people are moving to this bedroom community specifically because the schools are good. The houses are more expensive there because the schools are great. And why would somebody want to stay for this 3rd year program if there's no place for them to go afterwards, right? So it's a much easier thing to do to have people stay if you have an elementary program. So that's a much harder thing to overcome. I don't really have an answer for you. If you don't have an elementary program, it's going to be harder, but you can still keep people if you basically continue in conversation with them about what that payoff benefit year is.
Right. And Teresa has a question. Does your tuition cost decrease for the 3rd year?
No, it doesn't. In fact, it goes up every year, and it will continue to go up every year. The cost of running a school is, 70% of our costs go to labor. And we need to make sure that in order to keep highly qualified guides and long-term assistants, we have to pay them well. We have to offer a benefit structure that works for them. And it's just going to continue to go up. I set that expectation when they tour. You need to expect a 5% increase a year. That's just what it's going to be, And if that's not going to work for you, you probably should look for something else. We are not a commodity, right? We're not a Walmart where we are selling, something, a t-shirt at the cheapest price. This is a bespoke method of education that's highly personalized and nuanced. And it takes a lot of time and effort to do, and that translates out into, paying people for their time and paying professionals for their time. So this is going to be the biggest investment that people make besides their home and their, really, it's more than their car payment's going to be. Absolutely. But what is the benefit of it, right? Always be focusing on those benefits of the child in terms of what they want long-term for their child to be.
Yeah, good. Can we shift over, unless you have some more thoughts about that piece in particular?
No.
Can we shift over to tour processes? And I have a particular question just about maybe some nuggets, some golden nuggets that you have that your admissions director uses that is really key to getting the right families in the door.
What do you mean by in the door?
So you have a waiting list, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your waiting list, you want to be able to choose the families that are most likely going to stay throughout your entire program. Mm-hmm. I imagine in your process, the tour process, or even just the admissions process, maybe it goes beyond that. Are there particular highlights in that process that you make sure are done so that those that sign and enroll in your school are truly at the top of the waiting list, or the pick of the waiting list? Does that make sense?
It does. Where could I start with that? I guess I'm lucky to have worked with an admissions director for so long that I trust her instinct, and I know that's not the answer that you want to hear. She was a long-term guide. I've worked with her for a very long time, and you can kind of start to tell. And I guess my point about this would be, you need to budget in enough time where you can talk about what they're looking for and what their needs are. This is not about coming through and hitting all the high points about what Montessori is. It's actually more of a conversation. Why are you here? How did you hear about us? What about our school intrigues you? What are your long-term goals and hopes and aspirations for your child? Is this a good fit, right? When you start from that context, not just like, hey, sign up now, let's start tomorrow, but do you think this is a good fit for your child? Do you think that our philosophy is going to be right for your family? And in those conversations, you can start to really determine whether or not at a core level, what we're doing is going to be congruent with what they're offering at home. That's probably the first thing, is that there's a congruency, right? Where there's a base level of, we agree on what environment we should be providing for children. For your child, and we want to be your partner in that process. We don't want to necessarily be, a place where you just drop off your child for 3 hours a day. This is a long-term partnership to get to a goal. So I would schedule enough time in the tour to be able to have that conversation. Now, I'm going to kind of contradict what I just said, because one of the things that we do too is, you have to expect that people are going to be booking tours and not showing up, which is extremely frustrating. And so we've actually started double booking tours where, and again, we've talked about this extensively before on Nido, but if you're not using an online booking program for your school, you are wasting time and money. So please start using Calendly or some other type of program. But with that, what we're doing is we have 2 spots available for each tour, because we have a no-show rate of about 40%. And I don't want my admissions director to be wasting her time waiting for a tour and nobody shows up. That's just the way that it is in 2019. People are overscheduled, overbusy, and you have to assume that they're going to make an appointment and either cancel or not show up for whatever reason. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that they made a choice and they're overwhelmed, or they're going to come back. We want to make it easy for them to come back and tour eventually, but we double book tours for that purpose. And so it's harder to have that type of conversation when you have two people in there. I haven't really found a hack for that yet, but what I would do is just some quick tips. Number one, make sure your admissions director is somebody that can have an in-depth conversation and ask questions and has a background in Montessori that would be able to make that decision. And really, I guess the second thing would be to trust your gut, right? When you have a gut feeling about somebody, you should be able to then either point them in the right direction. We don't give our application links out to people. You can't apply unless we're sending you the link in an email. And if we tour somebody and we don't really feel like this is going to be a good fit, they're not getting an email with an application link. Yeah, they can ask for it. And after they ask for it, we could then have a conversation and really get some more information about whether or not it's going to be a good fit. But the only way you're going to apply is kind of if you pass that first sniff test with our admissions director, which is why I believe that it's a really essential position for you to develop, because she is the gatekeeper. He or she is the gatekeeper that is going to determine the community that develops at your school.
When you have people apply, so they've gone through that process, they have the link, they apply, do you have more people apply than your spots? And if you do, what does that process look like?
Sure, that's a great question. So this of course depends on the time of the year. So like great story. I was talking to our registrar yesterday about this, and we were trying to prioritize. We actually have very limited spaces available in primary right now because we have so many toddlers scheduled to move up, and we have to keep spaces open for them to have ability to move up at a certain time. And that's a whole separate process about how we're managing the transitions from infancy to toddler to primary. Elementary is easy because it only starts, once a year. But, a toddler could transition up any time in the year, and we're in California, and depending on where you are, it may be different, but I know that there are going to be age requirements that you have to move up to a certain classroom at a certain time, depending on your local licensing requirements. So what I was talking to our registrar about is, we have all these people that have applied. How are we going to prioritize the people that we're admitting? Well, the first thing that I would say is we're absolutely going to admit a 3-year-old over a 4-year-old, because that is a longer relationship. And even when you have a 4-year-old, and even if they're super committed, you got about 9 months before they're going to be making a decision about what they're going to be doing for the future. So that would be my number one priority. Number two priority would be, they're coming in with siblings, because we're going to prioritize, a family that has 2 children in our school. And again, so the younger, the better for us. And then again, we're going back to this thing where we're really looking at, well, how did they come into us? And what is our feeling about their level of interest in Montessori? And that's going to be done through the tour and the observation that the admissions director is holding, and those subsequent conversations. And I know that that's not data driven, right? It's very much more kind of a feeling based. I'd love to be able to get to a database point where we can say, great, they've hit all these high points, and that means that they're a level 1 tier admissions, right? Versus somebody that didn't, and then they're level 3. We haven't gotten to that point. Right now, it's much more feelings based.
Mm-hmm. So when you don't accept those that have applied, do you give them a refund? Do you not and prepare them for that, or how does that look?
Sure. So I'll refund their application fee. We have a pretty significant, our application fee is $400. I mean, just to put in an application under school, you're going to pay $400. That's kind of another, barrier, because if somebody's just going around putting their name on wait lists in preschools, they're not going to want to pay $400 to be on a wait list. So that it sets a barrier to enrollment and kind of lets us know that they're serious. So yeah, I'll absolutely refund their app fee. That's one thing that I would highly recommend that you do at your school, is that you never want to make this about money. You want to make it very, very easy, and you want to be upfront about the fact that what your financial policies are. And, if you can't accommodate them, of course, the last thing I want in the community is bad will that we took $400 from somebody and, then we never gave them a spot. Always refund their money. Once they are accepted, then they're putting down a tuition deposit. For us, it's $1,000. You're going to put down $1,000. Once you are, you're definitely coming. This is your spot. We're reserving the spot for you at this date. And if for whatever reason you drop off, that money is going to be applied to that spot in the event that we can't fill it. So it's a progression, and time and money are usually the time of the person, whether that's coming for an observation or coming for a meeting with a teacher, and then money, whether that's an application fee or a tuition deposit, are kind of the ways that you're testing whether or not somebody is seriously considering and planning on doing this. Because you will have people, I get back to that buyers or liars thing. I know that's a cliche and I don't really like saying it, but it's so true, right? People will tell you anything. And sometimes they don't even know what they want. They're just kind of, considering it. But we don't want to get married with you until we're 100% sure that this is something that's important to you and that it's a good fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So those of you that are here live, if you've got any questions for Matt, I'm sure he would be happy to take them. You always have such good information, Matt. I love having you on here.
Thank you.
I feel like we could probably talk for hours and hours about process and stuff, but it's, I want to go back to a point that you made where your admissions director just has a feeling for it. And I feel like there's just such a human aspect of that, because we could talk about processes all day long and what's the best policy and procedure and whatnot to be able to do that, but really it does come down to that. And it's about human connection. It's about relationships in the process and getting that feel. So while you said maybe it's not the best answer, I think that's a huge piece of this. It's finding an admissions director that really can get to the heart of it and sift through that confusion that parents may have when they're walking into a completely different environment that they've ever seen before. Oftentimes there's the shock factor of like, what is this? It's crazy. Why is it quiet? It's, like, why are there 3-year-olds around and they're not like running around screaming? That's what I saw at the last place I was at. And have an admissions director that can bring you through that process in a very generous and kind, but, authoritative way, I think is really amazing. So that was a really good point. So.
Thanks. So I would listen, if you don't have an admissions director, I recognize that, so many Montessori schools could be just, one primary environment. It could be 2. You don't have to be a gigantic school, and you may not have an admissions director. That's a reality too. So how about this? The person that's doing admissions should either be the director who has a background in Montessori, whether you're the director, whether you're the owner, whether you're the head of school. That should be your job. It's such an important job. Like, you shouldn't really just ferret this off. You should never have, your office manager or secretary or whoever do your tours. That's the kiss of death. Don't do it. You heard it here first. Please do not, because what you're going to get is a very, very thin experience for the parent. They're not going to be able to get into the context, and that person that's giving the tour isn't going to be able to provide you any context about making an admissions decision. So either do it yourself if you're the head of school, director, owner, whatever, or have one of your guides do it, right? That would be my second choice. Like, have your guide do it. That person who has a background in Montessori. Listen, if you're a small school especially, that's the person who's going to be in the classroom. That's the person who's actually going to have the best feeling about, oh, what's my relationship going to be like with this parent? Do I want to invite this person into my classroom? I will preface this by saying this is so easy to do when you have demand. Right? If you are struggling with your school and your class size is 36 and you've got 17 children and you're freaking out, listen, you do what you need to do to make payroll. So this is a privilege of having demand. And that's why we started NIDO in the first place, is that in order to operate a high quality, authentic Montessori school, you have to have demand. That is essential. And there are ways to do that. And you have to spend money to do that. And marketing works. It works. I promise you it works if you do it consistently. But you're not going to get to this point where we're talking about admissions unless you have sufficient demand. So this is really a moot point unless you have a consistent, steady stream of people coming in. You shouldn't even be thinking about this. You should be thinking about how to increase demand. So let's not put the cart before the horse. You need to make sure you're getting a significant amount of increase coming in, and then you can start to pick and choose. Right? It's a much better position to be in when you know that, gosh, well, it's not going to work out with this family, but I've got a couple other families that I'm talking to that may be a better fit. And that's how you craft a community, but it starts with demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a good point. Absolutely. Because most schools aren't in that situation. And it's one that, you want to get to. But you worked hard to get there. You know, like you've also been in a situation where, you know, you're looking at spots that are open, and I mean, that's why Nido exists as well, is because you've really put your heart and soul into this, and a lot of money, right? Like you spent a lot of money figuring out the avenues that work best for, you know, Montessori schools. So, yeah, you're speaking from experience. Absolutely.
Listen, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I think one of the biggest points of resistance for Montessorians to spend money on marketing is they resent the fact that, listen, I've seen it, I've lived it. We resent the fact that people don't see how incredible this method of education is. And it's a no-brainer for us, right? We're trained. We went through. We see, oh my gosh, this woman 100 years ago who was a certifiable genius created this method of education that is amazing. I've seen it work. I've seen it work with these children. I know. So why wouldn't you come? Why wouldn't there be a line around the block? And it's almost like offensive when it's like, hey, we have to put it out. It's like, why would we even have to market this? Because this is this amazing thing, right? And the reality is that we're looking at it from our perspective, and we're not looking at it through the filter of everybody else in our local community where, you know, they heard that Montessori is only for children with special needs. They think that Montessori is a Waldorf school. They think that Montessori has no rules. They think that, you know, Montessori is just a preschool, right? So there's so many misconceptions out there that we have to overcome that. We have to be able to put out a consistent marketing message and just stay top of mind in our community, so that you have enough people coming in that you can then start to pick and choose a little bit more about who is going to be a member of your community.
Mm-hmm. So, Matt, have you had any success with highlighting what you're not as a program versus what you are?
It's a very good question. I was actually thinking about this earlier today. There's a lot of power when you're crafting messages about being very direct about who this is not going to work for and what we are not. So, like at the elementary level, being really clear about the fact that we don't have homework, being really clear about the fact that we don't have tests, being really clear about the fact that, you know, in primary, we are focused on a 3-year commitment that includes the kindergarten year, that this is not a preparation for kindergarten. There's a lot of, I think what that does is that communicates authenticity. And you're not trying to, you know, just tell this is going to be the most fantastic thing ever, and every problem you've ever had with your child or your family is going to be solved by coming to our school. I think that, you know, some people will buy into that fantasy, but I think a lot of people respect the fact when you're helping them make a decision by being direct about what you're not. So I think that's something that could absolutely be heightened and explored more. I don't think enough schools do that. I mean, we do that to a certain extent in some of our marketing, but that's actually, here's a good point about that. Shouldn't be your first message, right? Your first message should be something that's inspiring, something that's welcoming, something that is basically creating consistent awareness. But then as you start to come down that funnel, you can start to give little pieces of information that start to help people filter themselves out. And by the way, if you've come into our ecosystem and you've expressed interest and then you realize that this isn't right for your family, you've actually done us a great favor, because we don't have to spend time and attention talking to you and trying to ferret that out for you. And number two, you're not going to enroll in our school and be disappointed. So that's actually what we want them to do. And that's going to be the role of an email series, an autoresponder, where you're actually sending them select bits of information over time so they can start to digest it and make that decision themselves. And again, we've talked about email autoresponders ad nauseum, but it's free. All it takes for you to do is some time and a little bit of technical chops that we can absolutely help you with. And then it just works in the background, right? And it's this other layer that's applied on top of all of your other messaging that just helps. So highly recommend that you do that. We have courses on that available in the members section.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Matt, I know it sounds like you're blowing up over there. You've got a lot of stuff going on. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll take maybe 5 more minutes just to wrap up. And if anybody has any questions to chime in, that'd be awesome to hear from you. But such good stuff, Matt. This is always so helpful to kind of know what you're up to, good tidbits. And you know what I love too is that you're learning along the way. You know, you don't have all the answers. You've got a lot of really great ones, but you're also revamping it, and you're constantly thinking about how to improve, which I think is just, that's who you are. But I really appreciate that part of you.
Oh, well, thank you. Mistakes is how you learn, and I make a ton of them. And you just got to keep moving forward. So that's my mantra in life. We got a new question. How do you tell people no when you decide not to accept them? Great question. My preference is not to have a standard form letter that goes out where it's just general. Ideally, you're making that decision together before they apply and before you have to have a difficult conversation. So again, that's why we hold off on giving them the option to apply until we've had a number of conversations, right? So you're only able to apply to our school when we've emailed you out the link to apply online. So if you have an application that's available on your website, I'd recommend you take that off, because you can get some phantom apps coming in and you're like, well, who even is this person? And then, you know, that can cause some problems when you get people coming in later and you didn't really consider it thoroughly. So if you can, take your application off your website, control who gets that. And then, so by the time they're getting that application, you should have had some conversations and maybe put up some serious questions about, you know, whether this is going to be right for them. If people are still doing that and you're kind of on the fence, yeah, give them the application. But you can always let them know that, you know, we don't believe this is the right fit. 95% of you are, I'm sure, private schools. And depending on the state in which you're in, I'm quite certain that you have the ability to do that. You will make some people upset at some point. You just will. But what is the cost of admitting somebody who you know is not going to be a good fit? The cost is that your community starts to suffer. They're the people that will leave for kindergarten and take 3 other families with them. You know, again, I get back to this thing about trust your gut and go with that. So Heidi, it's not easy, but you should not have that happen a lot, I guess, Heidi, is my point. Like, if it's happening a lot, you're doing something else wrong. It's going to happen on occasion, once or twice a year, where it's like, gosh, you have to have a difficult conversation. Again, when you're denying somebody admission, I would strongly recommend having a conversation on the phone or in person with them, not just sending out a blanket form letter, because I think that just creates more energy. And if you're empathetic about it and you can be honest with them about the reasons why you're not accepting them, I don't know what else there is to talk about. And it's not going to be something where you're being rude or dismissive by just saying, nope, your child's not right for this program, goodbye. So highly recommend doing that on a one-to-one human basis. We had a question from Teresa saying, what was the email autoresponder you mentioned? So Teresa, all an email autoresponder is it's a program that exists in whatever your mass email program is, whether it's MailChimp, whether it's Entreport, whatever you're using. We have a lot of assets on Nido about MailChimp because it's free and it's easy to use. All this does is once somebody opts in, and again, there's a myriad of ways to opt in. They can opt in on your website. They can opt in when they schedule a tour. They can opt in, you know, when they walk in or when they have a phone call. If you're collecting these email addresses and you're putting them into one centralized database. When they come into this database, it starts a series where there's a program that says, hey, over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to email them twice a week. And here's the order of emails that are going out. And it's a series. And you're slowly starting to drip content out about aspects of the program, about benefits of Montessori, about why they should choose a Montessori school and not a, you know, conventional preschool, about all those nuances that exist. And the beautiful thing about email, well, there's 2 things. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything to do, right? Which we love. And number 2, that element of time, when you're doing that drip over time, it works to help people digest information. Montessori is 100% about nuance. You are not going to go to a half-hour tour or a 1-hour tour and understand what Montessori is. It's impossible. At the same time, we don't want them to have to read the discovery of the child, the translation, you know, from Dr. Montessori's in Italian to understand Montessori either. That's not going to work. But if you can suss out what those individual points you want to make about your school, about what makes your school unique, about what makes Montessori unique, about how they can choose this, if you're helpful, these emails don't have to be long. They get these over the next 6, 8. You can do an autoresponder as long as you want to set that up. Right? If you got content for the next year, send them a year series. then they can start to, even if they read 1 out of every 3 emails, you're still top of mind, and you're still giving the information to help them decide to move forward in that process. Teresa says she understands, so I just did a fantastic job explaining.
Awesome. And Matt, I just had a question. Now, this is a big question, so feel free to kind of shorten up the answer here, but I got a question from Monica at Sunstone. So she is wondering, which we talked a little bit about the admissions process already, but are there particular aspects or highlights that you have that help to convey the benefits of Montessori, helping parents understand Montessori education, and getting on board as partners to support their children?
First of all,
right?
Monica,
I know it's a big question.
I owe Monica an email. I got back from vacation on Sunday, so I owe Monica an email because she emailed me. So Monica, you're going to hear from me soon. My email inbox.
Maybe just add the answer to that one.
Yes. God, that is such a hard question, and it depends on so many different things. It depends on the size of your school. Listen, we're a large school. We got 500 children. You could have a school of 30 children, and it's going to be different for your school. And it also depends on whether or not you have elementary, because you're competing against free and you're competing against private schools. So it really depends. If there was one thing that's the most effective, it is a personal relationship and an ongoing conversation. We cannot expect, this is not an off and on switch, right? People don't buy into Montessori and it's like, it's on, I'm never questioning it again. They're going to go up and down. I hate to tell you, they're going to go up and down because the child is going to experience different phases in their life, and they're going to be really pleased with some things, and they're not going to like other aspects of it, and they're going to think, well, if we made a change, we're a school with this help it. They're going to go to birthday parties and soccer games, and they're going to hear about, how these great test scores are coming out from this school, and my child's in GATE and all this other stuff, right? So it's keeping them close. It's keeping them in the fold. And really, and there's no other way to do that except for having those relationships. And it's taxing, right? So the relationship that your guide has with the parent and the relationship that your school has with the parent. And so there's a lot of kind of that checking in. I wish there was a way to quantify that, but if there's one thing that I would do, it's just have conversations frequent, often about their child, and really know that, I think the most important thing is that they feel like you are their partner. And you are being purposeful in checking in with them, that it's not them coming to you. It's that, hey, how are things going? I've been noticing this about Sarah at school. Have you noticed anything about that? What are you thinking about that, right? So the more you can have those conversations, I think the more bonded they're going to feel to you, and the more you're going to trust you, and the more they're going to be less apt to leave because of external influences.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've also found to be helpful in talking with parents is asking the question, well, what do you want for your child? So when they're 30, when they're 40, when they're 50, right? What are the qualities you want? And actually, Donna talks about this in some of the videos that are going to be coming out for the Parent Ed series that we're doing. But we've never heard a parent say, well, I want my child to be able to sit in a desk. I want my child to listen to directions from, a particular person without asking more. It's more of, I want my child to be a creative learner. I want them to, enjoy life. All those aspects that we know that most of us are looking for. We do that so well. So if we can incorporate that in our process early on, you're really speaking to what the parents feel and what they need. And if you're asking them that particular question, what is it that you want for your child 30 years from now? We're not making promises, but we're showing them that we actually have these environments that are so rich in giving opportunities to children over and over again to be able to do that and really cultivate those skills that we're looking for successful people in this world that's always changing.
I agree.
Yeah, cool. Matt, as always, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your openness. We really appreciate that. Awesome. Can we have you back next month? Is that cool?
Absolutely. Yep. October it is.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I will shoot you an email. I'll book you.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks for coming.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Take care. I